Angel Whitaker stood in the living room with her purse slung over her shoulder and a small duffel bag resting at her feet. The packed bag represented weeks of difficult decisions, sleepless nights, and a determination to start over. Taking a shaky breath, she looked directly at Donald and said, "I'm done, Donald. I'm leaving tonight." Her voice trembled, but there was no uncertainty in her words. Donald stood between her and the front door. His face tightened with anger, and his eyes never left hers. The tension that had been building for weeks had finally reached its breaking point. "You're not going anywhere," he snapped. "After everything I've done for you?" Angel shook her head. "Move out of the way," she replied. "This is over." The room felt smaller with every passing second. Neither of them backed down. Years of frustration, resentment, and arguments seemed to hang in the air between them. Angel took a step toward the door, determined to leave. Donald stepped forward and blocked her path again. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds. Angel tried to push past him. Donald grabbed her arm and pulled her backward. She struggled to break free, demanding that he let go. Her purse fell to the floor as she fought against his grip. The argument exploded into chaos. Voices rose. Furniture shifted. The small living room became the scene of a desperate struggle. Then, in a moment of uncontrolled rage, Donald swung. The blow struck the side of Angel's head with devastating force. She collapsed instantly onto the floor. The room fell silent. For a moment, Donald simply stared. His anger vanished and replaced by shock. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The only sound left in the house was his heavy breathing. "Angel," he whispered. He dropped to his knees beside her and shook her shoulders. "Angel, wake up." His voice grew louder and more frantic. He called her name again and again, hoping for any sign of movement. None came. Minutes earlier, Angel Whitaker had been preparing to walk out the door and begin a new chapter of her life. Now she lay motionless on the living room floor. The realization hit Donald with terrifying force. What had begun as another argument had ended in tragedy. In a single moment of violence, a woman who was loved by her family and known as a devoted mother of three had lost her life. Outside, the night remained quiet. Neighbors went about their evenings, unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded behind the walls of the house. Inside, the consequences of one explosive confrontation were already beginning to reshape countless lives forever. Donald stared at her lifeless body in stunned silence. Panic set in fast. His mind raced through the consequences, the end of the life he had built. He couldn't let this be discovered. Not in this manner. He dragged her body into the garage, wrapped it in old tarps and blankets from his truck, and loaded it into the back of his vehicle under the cover of darkness. The mountain roads were empty. As he drove east across the state line into Virginia, heading toward the remote wooded areas he knew well from years of hunting and fishing, near Bastion in Bland County, he found a secluded spot, off an old logging road. Under the faint moonlight, he dug a shallow grave, poured concrete over the body to weigh it down, and covered everything with rocks, dirt, and debris. By the time he finished, the sun was rising. Donald Pennington had committed murder and tried to make Angel disappear forever. Just weeks earlier, the relationship had looked like something fragile but still fixable, like a second chance neither of them fully trusted. Yet both kept reaching for anyway. Angel had moved from Bristol to Bluefield in January 2026, after Donald offered her an assistant manager position at the O'Reilly Auto Parts store where he worked. On paper, it sounded like stability, steady income, a familiar face in a new town, and the hope of rebuilding a life that had felt unsettled for years. For Angel, who was trying to create a safer and more reliable environment for herself and her 3 children. The offer had seemed like an opportunity she couldn't easily ignore. At first, the transition felt almost hopeful. Bluefield, with its quiet streets and surrounding mountains, gave the impression of a slower and simpler life. Angel and Donald slipped back into familiar rhythms. They shared meals after long shifts, revisited old memories that made them laugh, and spoke, sometimes cautiously, sometimes boldly, about what it might look like to finally get it right this time. There were moments when it almost felt like they had outrun their past mistakes. But those moments never lasted long. Donald's insecurities, once occasional, began to surface more frequently and more intensely. What started as concern slowly turned into control. He would ask where she had been, who she had spoken to, why she had stayed late at work. He began checking her phone when he thought she wasn't paying attention, reading messages that weren't meant for him, and reacting sharply to even harmless interactions with customers or coworkers. Angel tried to keep things calm at first, brushing off his accusations and reassuring him when she could. But the atmosphere in the relationship steadily tightened. Conversations that once ended in laughter now ended in silence or frustration. Small disagreements lingered longer, turning into arguments that neither of them fully resolved. By early April, the change was undeniable. Angel confided in friends that the relationship no longer felt safe or sustainable. She spoke quietly about needing to leave, about going back to Bristol, and about finding a way to restart without constant tension hanging over her. She had begun making mental plans, weighing logistics, and preparing herself for the difficult conversation she knew was coming. What once had looked like a hopeful restart had over time become something far more complicated, an unstable balance between attachment and fear. With Angel slowly realizing that staying was no longer an option she could justify to herself. Angel had packed quietly while Donald was at work, moving through the house with a controlled urgency, trying not to let emotions slow her down. When he returned and saw the bags by the door, the shift in him was immediate. The air in the room changed before either of them even spoke. Accusations came fast. Donald accused her of using him, of abandoning everything they had tried to rebuild. Angel fired back, her voice breaking as she told him she felt trapped, watched, and worn down by months of suspicion. What began as words quickly turned into shouting, both of them pushing into old wounds neither had fully healed. The argument escalated until restraint disappeared entirely, and in the chaos of the confrontation, it ended in a single fatal blow that neither could undo. Afterward, the house fell into a heavy, unnatural stillness. Donald moved through it in a frantic haze, cleaning surfaces, rearranging objects, trying to erase the sense that anything had gone wrong there at all. He sent a few vague text messages from Angel's phone, carefully worded to suggest she had left on her own terms, then powered the device off and kept it hidden away, hoping time would create distance and confusion. But distance never came the way he expected it to. At first, Angel's absence was treated like a possible voluntary departure. People knew she had been planning to leave town, and that detail made the situation uncertain rather than immediately suspicious. Still, something about it didn't sit right. Angel was a devoted mother. Routine mattered to her. She checked in with her children regularly, even on busy days, and days passed without a single call. By April 24th, concern had turned into alarm. Her disappearance was officially reported to authorities in both Virginia and West Virginia, triggering a coordinated response. Investigators began with standard checks, phone activity, financial records, and social media patterns. Nothing showed the kind of movement expected from someone starting a new life elsewhere. Donald was interviewed early in the process. At first, he presented himself as confused and concerned, insisting that Angel had left after a fight and likely returned to Bristol. His story, however, began to fray under basic questioning. Timelines didn't align cleanly. Details shifted slightly when repeated. Small inconsistencies, easy to overlook individually, started forming a pattern that investigators could not ignore. What initially looked like a missing person case slowly began to take on the structure of something far more serious. As the search intensified, the case began to shift from uncertainty toward structure, each new piece of evidence tightening the timeline and narrowing the possibilities investigators were considering. Digital records from Angel's account provided the first emotional context behind the disappearance. Recovered Facebook messages showed a gradual escalation in distress in the days leading up to April 17th. In earlier exchanges, she appeared conflicted but still trying to keep the peace. Later messages became more direct. She told Donald she needed space, that the relationship was no longer healthy, and that she was seriously considering leaving for good. Her tone changed from hesitant to firm. suggesting she had already begun mentally separating herself from the situation. Donald's replies, by contrast, became increasingly volatile. What started as pleading and reassurance gradually shifted into pressure, guilt, and implied consequences. Investigators noted a pattern that aligned with coercive behavior: emotional escalation when control was threatened, followed by attempts to reassert influence through fear and urgency. Phone data added another layer of precision to the timeline. Cell tower records placed both Angel's and Donald's devices in overlapping coverage zones, near the rural area around Bastion, on the night she was last seen and again early the following morning. While cell data alone could not explain what occurred, it strongly contradicted the idea that the two had simply separated and gone their own ways. Instead, it suggested continued proximity during the critical window of her disappearance. Surveillance footage from gas stations and small businesses along key routes further anchored Donald's movements. His truck was seen traveling eastbound during the same time frame, matching the general direction of the area flagged in the phone records. Though the footage did not show what happened at the destination, it helped investigators reconstruct a continuous path, rather than isolated, explainable stops. The case took a decisive turn when detectives received a critical tip from Donald's former girlfriend. She came forward after learning about Angel's disappearance, providing context that investigators had not yet uncovered. According to her statement, Donald had made unsettling remarks in the days following Angel's disappearance, comments that did not match his public version of events. He referenced a violent confrontation and implied that he had taken care of the problem, language investigators recognized as highly incriminating when paired with the other evidence. Her cooperation gave detectives something they had been missing: a human link between Donald's private statements and the growing body of digital and physical evidence. What had started as a missing person report now had multiple converging threads: communication history, location data, vehicle movement, and witness testimony, all pointing in the same direction. With that foundation, investigators moved from passive collection to active building of a case, seeking warrants, expanding searches, and preparing to confront inconsistencies directly. What had once been a confusing disappearance was now forming into a coherent narrative of events that demanded answers. On May 10th, search teams combing the wooded areas near Bastion made the grim discovery. Angel's body was found buried in a shallow grave, encased in concrete and hidden under layers of debris. The condition of the remains confirmed she had been dead for weeks. The news devastated the communities on both sides of the state line. Angel Whitaker, once full of quiet hope, had been discarded in the mountains like trash. Donald Pennington was arrested on May 13, 2026. He was charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a deceased human body. During his arraignment, he pleaded not guilty, maintaining a calm demeanor that chilled those watching. But the evidence against him was mounting rapidly. Forensic teams found fibers from the tarps used to wrap Angel's body matching materials in Donald's garage. Soil samples from his truck tires matched the burial site. Tools recovered from his property showed traces consistent with digging and pouring concrete. Witnesses from the auto parts store recalled heated arguments between the couple in the weeks leading up to the murder. One coworker described Donald as unusually agitated in the days after April 17th. Angel's family was left shattered. In Bristol, her 3 children struggled to understand why their mother was never coming home. A GoFundMe was quickly set up to cover funeral costs and support the kids. Friends remembered Angel as a resilient woman who had faced life's challenges with grace. She had moved to Bluefield seeking stability, only to find danger in the man she once trusted. Her death became a painful symbol for many women in similar situations, trapped between hope and fear. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors built a narrative of possessive rage followed by calculated cover-up. They argued that Donald didn't just kill Angel in the heat of the moment. He methodically tried to erase her. The defense, meanwhile, prepared to claim the death was accidental, an unintended consequence of a domestic dispute, with the concealment born out of panic rather than malice. Legal experts following the case noted that the concrete burial suggested more deliberation than Donald's team wanted to admit. In the quiet Appalachian towns, the story lingered heavily. Candlelight vigils were held in Bristol and Bluefield. Flowers and photos of Angel's smiling face piled up at makeshift memorials. Her name became a whispered warning among friends and family members about the dangers of volatile relationships. She was just trying to start over. One friend told reporters. She deserved better than this. By late May, the case had attracted national attention. Major outlets covered the arrest, the discovery of the body, and the chilling details of the concealment. Donald remained in custody, his once stable life completely destroyed. The auto parts store where both had worked issued statements of condolence, while trying to distance itself from the scandal. Colleagues who had seen them together daily now grappled with disbelief. The final hours of Angel's life haunted investigators. They reconstructed the scene, the argument, the fatal blow, the desperate drive into the Virginia woods, the long night of digging and covering. Each piece of evidence told the story of a man who chose violence and secrecy over letting go. Donald had once offered Angel a new beginning. Instead, he delivered her end. As summer settled over the mountains, the legal battle was only beginning. The courts would eventually decide Donald Pennington's fate. But for Angel Whitaker's family and friends, justice would never fully heal the wound. She had been a mother, a daughter, a friend, someone who fought for a better life until her last breath. Her story, born in violence on that April night, served as a stark reminder of how quickly love can turn deadly and how far some will go to hide their sins. In the end, the hills of Virginia and West Virginia held their secrets for only so long. The concrete grave gave up its truth, and with it came the painful reality that Angel Whitaker's light had been extinguished by the very man who once claimed to care for her.